In 2006, the website Twitter came onto the scene with quite a bit of praise and had a lot of growth initially, hundreds into thousands into millions of people using it. And there are really two big reasons for that growth in the site. The first was the attraction to putting out your thoughts and opinions in 140 characters or less. People were intrigued by the idea of not just putting their thoughts and opinions out there, but in a way that was concise and hopefully easy to understand. But along with that, you had the hashtag, and I remember initially a lot of pushback on that at first from those that said it's not a hashtag, it's a pound sign, or it's not a hashtag, it's an octothorpe, which I know that word, but I didn't know ribbon marker. But it's not a hashtag, and now it's everywhere. There's a hashtag on everything. And the gimmick there was that not only could you share your thoughts and opinions, but you could tag those and catalog them and bring them all into one localized place so that you could see everybody's thoughts on the hashtag Olympics from all over the world if they used that little pound sign in their message. And so there was this great attraction to not only being able to express your opinion, but to be able to see other people's thoughts and opinions and have them all in one place and be able to share yours with people all over the world. We have a great desire to want to be heard. We want to know that our opinions, that the values that we have, the beliefs that we hold, that people value those things, that they're listening to what we have to say, that they care about what we have to say. And Twitter and so many other places, personal websites and blogs where people can put out their own thoughts, there are thousands of those added every day. And it was a way for people to be able to express their thoughts and opinions on things. It sounds great. For people who want to be heard, we have more outlets than ever before to share those thoughts with the world. Unfortunately, everybody is doing that. And so nobody's really being heard. We're just sharing our opinions and they're just lost among all the other opinions and things that are put out there. So while we have a place to share our voice, nobody's really listening to what we have to say. Last week we talked about Facebook and other groups as where we try to find our belonging, where we try to fulfill our need to belong to something greater than we are, and how only in Jesus can we find something greater than we are and be a part of something that's truly greater than we are. Today I want to talk about how Jesus listens to us, but not just that, how he listens to us and why that's such a beautiful thing. Something we don't deserve at all, but why it's so wonderful that he does. In figuring all of this out, or in laying this out, I want us to go to Mark chapter 5, if you have your Bible with you. In Mark chapter 5, Jesus encounters three different groups of people, and in those encounters, he gives us three different ways that he listens to those people. And in each of those, we're going to see a different facet of how Jesus listens, not only listen to them here, but also listens to us. And then we'll talk about why that's so wonderful. Here's the first one. Jesus listens completely. This is in Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 6. Before we read there, Jesus comes to this location where there is a man possessed with demons. And every night and every day he's cutting himself, he's harming himself, he is screaming, presumably because he can't even think inside of his own head. There are all these demons inside of him. So he's crying out. He's very clearly in need of help. He's very clearly in need of people to be around him, but nobody wants to have anything to do with him. Nobody wants to listen to him. Nobody cares to stop and try to work with what he's got going on. They have tried at one point to hold him down, to keep him from being able to do these things, and he breaks free every time, and so now he finds himself alone until Jesus shows up. And that's where we pick up in verse 6. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. For he was saying to him, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And Jesus asked him, What is your name? He replied, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. And they begged him, saying, Send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. Very weird occurrence here, and there's quite a bit we can talk about. I'm sure the farmer was very upset about the loss of his pigs. But we have an occurrence here where a man being possessed by demons who nobody is dealing with, nobody is talking to, he sees Jesus, comes to him, falls before him, and starts talking. And there's a conversation between Jesus and the demons within this man. They go back and forth. The demons recognize who Jesus is. What have you to do with us, Son of the Most High God? We ask you, so the demons ask Jesus, don't send us out of the country. They know he can do that, but they're also asking, please don't do that. Also, don't torment us. Can you send us into these pigs instead? So there's this conversation Jesus has with these demons inside this man, and the text says he gave them permission to enter into these pigs. But the point I want us to see here is that he completely listens to this man, the demons within the man. He has this conversation with them, a back and forth. We talked about this last week with the woman at the well, how he engaged her in conversation. He started speaking, and she responds, and he heard what she had to say and responded with something else, and she responded to that, and back and forth throughout the whole chapter. He listened to what she had to say and gave her a response based on what she had said. He engages with the people that he talks to. He listens completely to those that talk to him. When we think about our prayers and the things that we might want to offer up to God that maybe we don't, I think sometimes we look at the goings on in our life, whether they be some problem that we're dealing with, some sin we're dealing with, something that's happening to us, and we go, you know what? It's pretty small. I don't think God really cares. I don't know that it's important enough for me to bring this before God. And maybe you don't do that. There are people who do that, who look at the things in their life as these things are trivial to God. God's concerned about more important things, but that's not true. God hears completely those that talk to him, and he wants to hear completely from those that talk to him. Prayer tends to be, at least for me, I'm going to pray about something I've done that I know is wrong and ask for forgiveness. I'm going to pray about a situation that I am unable to handle and ask God to intervene and do something about that situation. And sometimes I pray thanking God for something he's done. But I don't very often just talk to God about the day. Say, God, this is what I'm experiencing today. Thanks for allowing me to do that. Or, I don't know, I didn't know how the day was going to go, but I really enjoyed it. I appreciated it. We don't think of talking to God as a conversation, of just a casual, that's too casual, he doesn't really care. That's not true. Jesus listens completely to those that talk to him and that he speaks with. He wants to hear everything that we have to say. So don't ever think, what I have to say is not that important to him. He wants to know everything. That's the first way he listens to us, completely. Here's the second. Still in Mark chapter 5. Jump down to verse 21. Read about a man named Jairus, who after Jesus heals the demon-possessed man, by the way, that man comes to Jesus after he's freed from the demons and says, I want to go with you. Jesus says, no, you go, you stay here, you tell all the people what happened. And so here he goes and shares what he's thinking, what's happened to him, and it says the people heard him. People heard him, and they were amazed. They marveled at what happened. And Jesus gave this man a voice and a reason for people to listen to him and value what he had to say. After this, they go across the sea and go to the other side, and Jesus is approached by a man named Jairus. Verse 21. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him. Jesus has every reason, just like with the woman at the well last week, he had every reason not to strike up a conversation with her. Jesus is either traveling or teaching or doing some kind of miracle or other activity. He doesn't really get a break. In chapter 4, he gets to sleep on the boat, and then his disciples wake him up because there's a big storm. He very rarely gets to have this rest that he desperately needs. And it says here, he gets out of the boat after just dealing with a demon-possessed man. They travel across, he gets out, and a crowd immediately gathers around him, and he's beside the sea. So he doesn't even have time to take a few steps out of the boat before he's just crowded again with people. And a man comes running up and says, "My daughter is not well, she's going to die. Come and make her well." And there is no response from Jesus, at least not recorded here. There isn't a back and forth. It just says, "And he went with him." Jesus responded with urgency to the man's request. He responded with action to the man's request. And when we think about the things we lift up to God, God, I don't know what's going on in my life, I need your help. It can be tempting to think, when something doesn't happen on our timetable, that, well, maybe Jesus isn't hearing me. Maybe God is not doing anything about this. And it can be tempting, too, when things don't go according to the way we thought they would or according to the plans we had in mind, that maybe we go, okay, maybe God is not doing things at all or doing things the way that I want them, or maybe he doesn't really get what I'm looking for. It can be easy when we take something to God to wonder, is God doing anything with this at all? Jesus is not a passive partner in our prayers. He's actively involved to bring some conclusion, to act. He's not just listening, hearing the problems that we have, and I encourage you at some point, go through the Psalms and look at the prayers in the Psalms where somebody says, "God, please do something," and then tell me what follows that. Repeatedly, it's God doing something. Because God isn't just sitting there watching us from afar, "I hope you guys figure it out." He's actively involved in the lives of his people. And when we pray to him, don't get me wrong, they may not happen on the time frame we thought that they would or should. We're going to have some patience, sometimes more patience than others. And things may not always go the way that we think they would or should. We have to have faith, sometimes more than others. But never think that God just doesn't care about what you're dealing with, that he's not doing anything about the situation you're in. He's working because God listens with the intent to act urgently on our behalf. Here's the last of the three. Jesus listens with compassion. As he's going with Jairus to meet his daughter to go help in this situation, the crowd is still gathered around, and they're making their way through this crowd, and at some point, somebody reaches out and grabs him. Now, I'm sure a lot of people touched him while he was in the crowd. I mean, if you've ever been in a crowd of people, you're bumping people around and knocking into other people. But there's this woman here who's had a disease for quite some time, and she thinks, all right, I know that he can heal me. So if I reach out and if I can just even touch his clothes, then I can be healed. And so she reaches out, touches his clothes, and she's healed. But Jesus stops in the crowd and says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples go, come on. It's a crowd of people. There are a lot of people that touched you, all right? It's a crowd of people. You're bumping into a lot of people. No, somebody touched me. Who touched me? In verse 33, we read this. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Read the next verse in a second. He stops. Just imagine this. Okay, we've seen him now, as the reader. We've seen him heal a demon-possessed man. We see him now on the way to go heal this daughter who is going to die. He's going to bring her back to life. This woman knows, okay, if I can just touch his clothes, I'm going to be completely healed, and she is. But we're dealing with somebody who has incredible power. And that man with incredible power stops. Who touched me? And so she's scared. It says she's in fear and trembling, and she comes and says the whole truth. It's like you're going in front of going to the principal's office. There was a time in high school. It's my freshman year. It was just all downhill for me after this point. But freshman year, I get called into the principal's office because I've actually done good behavior. There's some award, I don't remember what it was called, but I was some chosen freshman for the month. But I was scared I had no idea why I was going to the principal's office. So I'm sitting in there, freaking out a little bit. There's fear and trembling. I'm ready to tell the whole truth too. I don't know what I'm going to be asked, but I'm going to say something and hope that I don't get in a lot of trouble. And then he tells me, you were selected for this month, great freshman and all this. And then he adds this, can you give me one of your parents' numbers? And how would you like me to call? Would you like me to say, congratulations, your son has been chosen for this award? Or would you like me to say, I have your son in my office? I said, yeah, that's how you need to call. It was wonderful. You need to ask my dad about that. But I'm scared. I'm scared. I didn't do anything wrong, but here I am being called in front. And here's this great crowd of people. She reaches out and touches him, and who knows what she's thinking? Okay, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just gone up and approached him and talked to him and said, hey, I have this disease, and I know that you can heal this, and because that's how so many other people have done it. And I shouldn't have just reached out and grabbed him, and now who knows what's going to happen. And fear and trembling, she falls down before him. She's getting ready to tell him the whole truth. And then verse 34, here's his response. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. There's no scolding. There's no, how dare you stop? Don't you see that I'm busy? It's go in peace. Your faith has made you well. Don't have the fear, don't have the trembling. Just go be healed now. The whole reason, and if we look at it from, doctrinally, Jesus comes to save us from our sin. That's A plus B. That's how that works. We have a sin problem, only Jesus can solve the sin problem, so he comes and dies, and that solves the problem. But we can't remove the emotional element of that. Jesus comes and lives as a human being, leaves heaven for that, and goes to the cross to die, not just to fix the sin problem, but because he wants to fix the sin problem, because he loves you, because he loves me. Because he cares, because he has compassion for us, because he knew we can't fix it ourselves, and I want to fix it for them. And so you have a woman here who has been struggling her whole life with this disease, and she just wants to be healed. She wants to be saved from it. That's his whole reason for being there. That's why, even though he's tired from traveling and from teaching and from doing all these things, that he still goes out and, come, my daughter needs help, and he goes with him. Or somebody reaches out and grabs them to be healed, and he says, go in peace and be healed. Go tell other people about what you've experienced, he says to the demon-possessed man. Go and tell other people about how they can be saved, because that's why I'm here. That's all Jesus has ever cared about, is bringing us salvation we need because he cares about us, because he loves us. And when we take those things to God in prayer, we can be confident not only that he's listening to us, but that he's hearing everything that we have to say, that he cares completely about what we're saying, and that he's going to do something on behalf of that care that he has for us to make something good happen. Here's why this is so wonderful. I want us to back up to chapter 4. I mentioned this a little moment ago. This is back in verse 35. When we start in verse 35, they go across, they're in a boat again, they're traveling. Everything's fine. And then all of a sudden, this great storm rises up. Waters are being thrown against the boat. It's inside the boat. They're going to sink. The boat's going to break apart. The disciples are scared. They don't know what's going on. And Jesus is sleeping. And so they say to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we're going to perish?" And Jesus stands up on the boat, and to the winds and to the waves he says, "Peace, be still." And everything has peace, and everything is still. And we read this in verse 41. They were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Who is this? Matthew does this a lot in his gospel. Mark does it a bit too, and he does it right here. Who is this? This is an open-ended question for us, but if you're reading this, the answer is, who is this that the wind and sea obey him? Well, it's the one who made the wind and the sea. And so they're going to respond to his call. When he says, "Stop moving, peace be still," they're going to have peace and be still. The point here is this: he's the creator. And that creator is listening. He didn't just set the world in motion and stand back and say, "Best of luck to all of you there on earth." He didn't make us and then step back. Hope you figure it out. He's not far from us. Now, he doesn't need to be involved in our life. We need him. He doesn't need us. He doesn't have to do this. But he wants to do this as our creator, to listen to what his creation has to say, to listen to all the things that we're struggling with, to the trials that we're dealing with, to the situations that we're just completely lost on. The creator is listening to us. That's part number one, why this is such a beautiful thing, that Jesus is listening. Number two is this: the king is listening. In all three of these places, verse 6, verse 22, verse 33, all three scenarios he encounters, did you notice what kept coming up? The response to Jesus when they saw him. The demon-possessed man came and fell down before Jesus. Jairus comes after Jesus steps off the boat and falls down before Jesus. And when Jesus stops in the crowd and says, "Who touched me?" the woman comes and falls down before Jesus. Every single time they come and fall down before the king. We had mentioned this a few months ago when talking about Solomon in our King's class. The thing that Solomon is probably most known for, the ruling that he's most known for, is when the two women come forward and say, "This child's mine, no, it's mine," and he makes the ruling of, "Well, let's give you each half of a child," and the real mother says, "No, just let her have the child if that's what's going to be its fate." And that's how Solomon knows the child belongs to that woman. Very well-known thing, and throughout the early part of Kings, people come all over to hear Solomon's wisdom because of that ruling. Kings would typically hear the problems that the people within their kingdom were dealing with. You would go to the king to get an answer to your problem. "King, I need justice for what's happened to me. King, I don't know how to handle this situation. What do you advise?" That was typically how it was done. But the king would not always hear the lowest in the society. Sorry, you're not important enough to bring your issue before the king, or your issue is not important enough to have it brought before the king. That's why when Absalom is gaining power, he is undercutting David by talking to people who David probably wouldn't have been able to handle anyway because he's already meeting with so many other people. So Absalom says, let me give you an answer to your issue. And that's how he takes power, because that's what kings did. They gave advice, they helped provide wisdom for what you were dealing with. The king here is doing the same thing. But there's nobody too lowly or unimportant or annoying or irritating that Jesus would not spend time with them. This king will hear anybody and everybody's issues, from big to small, recurring issues to here it is the first time it's ever happened. This king doesn't turn anybody away. He doesn't have to listen to us. The Creator King does not have to hear us at all, but He wants to. That's what makes this so special. Jesus is listening, but not just because, well, He has to listen. He wants to. But it takes us, like all three of these groups of people, falling down before Him in order for that to be a reality for us. If we want Jesus to listen completely, with urgency, and with compassion, we have to fall down on our knees and actually speak to Him. I want to encourage you to do this week. Every day, and I assume that you have a time where you pray personally. Maybe before you go to sleep, I pray just by yourself about things that have gone on in the day or about the next day. Maybe you wake up in the morning and do that. Maybe you pray in the shower, on the car drive, or you have a devotional time, or sometime throughout the day. I assume you do that. If you don't, this is a great time to start this. But if you do, here's what I want to encourage you to do. For 10 minutes every day this week, pray like you haven't prayed before. And I mean, if you've ever thought, God doesn't care about this, pray about those things that you think God doesn't care about. Just try it. Pray like you haven't before in that regard. If there's something that you are dealing with that you've tried to figure out, maybe you haven't taken that problem to God, pray about that situation. Every day this week, if you need to. Pray about it. Pray about the things that you wouldn't normally talk to God about. Pray about your day. Pray about some things that you think are minor. Pray about the successes that you're dealing with, because God wants to hear it. To Jesus, you are not unimportant, annoying, or insignificant. You're loved, and He's listening. The Creator King wants to hear from you and me. God wants nothing more than a relationship with us. That's why He sends His Son to leave heaven, to live here, to die on the cross, so that we could take Him, our pains, our trials, our successes, our thanksgivings, anything that we're dealing with. Because God wants to hear us talk. Jesus is listening. Let's fall down on our knees before Him and speak to Him.